5 minutes.
It's now 5
It's now 5 minutes, don't worry. I call it a short day's journey in the morning.
Various times as part of the summer school program, we've done innovative things. Occasionally we've done risky things. I've not seen this show. I hope this is not going to be the riskiest thing we've done. Tomorrow morning in the Dunbrody Immigration Centre, the Dunbrody Exhibition Experience, the Sean O'Rourke Show, today with Sean O'Rourke Show begins broadcasting live from the Ross at 10 o'clock in the morning. It will feature an extended personal interview profile with Governor O'Malley, a panel of some of our speakers, particularly on American politics, Tad Devine and Bernie Saunders, who's chief strategist, who's speaking on Saturday, will be part of the programme, as will Kevin Cullivan of the Boston Globe, up there behind us, who has an interesting and strong take on the current state of American presidential politics, and Stacey Hilliard, who is the head of American Overseas, former vice chair of Republican UK, will give the Republican take on the election. And then Minister Brendan Powell and Paul Keogh and a few of the rest of us will do a political panel that will look back at the week. And I gather from the programme as well they have Ian Griffin to give his take, not only on the sorry state of some of Wexford hurling, but also on the changing state of tourism and the economy in the area. So if you're near a radio at any stage tomorrow morning between 10 and 12, and the new Ross will feature bigger. So we're drawing a curtain down over John F. Kennedy temporarily. The Late Late Show.
Keep talking now.
Callum's Kicks.
Yeah.
Kilconomics.
Yeah.
Devising.
Yeah.
This is the cutting edge of comedy, intelligent comedy.
And I still don't earn as much as Captain to Come. My travel budget. And
he also, it won't surprise you to hear, is an occasional regular contributor to the scripts for Callum's Kicks.
Yes.
We're ready, Paddy?
But I don't do the president ones. Just, just let you know, I'm a Republican. Sorry to the O'Malleys. An Irish Republican. Just, which you're allowed to say now, finally. Ladies and gentlemen. So the Sandman is coming up, and we're going to get the visuals up and we're already ready to go. So who's excited? Yeah. Thank you to Noel Whelan for inviting me down. Thank you, Noel. We'll take the lights down if that's okay. We want to see the visuals. That's all right. Thank you. We've got our mic going. Anyway, just to let you know, I do work on those things, and they're brilliant and all, but this is like political satire and humour, but it's a bit like the Late Late Show itself. It starts off well, and then it's far too long. You end up completely depressed by the end of it. Okay? Let's be honest. Okay, can you see that visual there, or is the lights too bright? The lights too bright. Let's bring the lights down, if that's okay. Because the lights are way too bright. And we can take down the lights in the room as well. As beautiful as you are, New Ross. Okay, I don't want to see it. Now, actually I do. So, it's better to know that you're not reacting. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So, for instance, I'm going to go through the 10 dark secrets of 1916 very quickly. It's a complete lie, but only one of them is to do with 1916. But it's to do with the Irish Revolution in general. The Revolution and the War of Independence, and then the Counter-Revolution, otherwise known as the Civil War. So already we're on thin ground there. And just for Dr. Dowling, this is both propaganda, theatrical propaganda, and it's going to change minds. Just to let you know. Not only will it change minds, it will blow minds, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, thank you. So that's me there because of Redmond. The first thing we have to deal with before everything is revision. I'm revising history here tonight. Much like Kevin Myers, my spirit animal. Revising history there by saying how the poor black and tans, or the poor old black and tans, Jesus, they were poor lads. And we also have the Sunday Independent, an amazing newspaper, ladies and gentlemen. I tried to switch to Andrex, but I had to go back to the Sunday in those soft revisionist fibres, ladies and gentlemen. They also hate the revolution, ladies and gentlemen. They hate the revolution. And we have our friend, of course, Bob Geldof, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to do a song for Bob. If I can start off with a song, would you like that? And I'd like you to join in on backing vocals. Okay? You can relax now.
visionless chip inside my head, the switch to overload. I came over from the UK, I wish I'd fuck off home. The rising I don't understand it, my opinion is 100 years old. It makes me see no reason, cause there is no reason that my world's worth its weight in gold. Gold, 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 gold. Tell me why I don't like Mr. Monday. Tell me why I don't like Mr. Monday. Tell me why I don't like Mr. Monday. I wanna shoot. TV machine is kept so clean as I ran to a waiting world. It's not about games, it's about my hate for how artists try to change their own little world. Rebellion with the skills of Boon ISIS. Howard Fisk called them ISIS too. And I've lost my reason, I've committed high treason. Our flag should be red, white, and blue. Ooh! And I'm not talking about the American flag. Tell me why I don't like Mr. Monday. I don't like Mr. Monday. Mr. Monday. Oh, hold day down. Actually, I'm not going to shoot anyone because I'm a pacifist. Now the Russian century's day is done. They've already moved on to World War One. Students will be learning, and some will be earning from this never-ending commemoration. And they will rise our hackles with revisionist cackles and lies about the hows and whys. They can see no reason, there is no reason, because everyone who disagreed with me died, 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 died.
Tell me why.
This is the worst episode of Movie I've ever been in my life.
1, 2, 3. Tell me why I don't like Mr. Mondays. 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 Tell me why I don't like Easter Mondays. I don't like Mr. Mondays. I wanna shoot. The whole day. No, thank you. Thank you. You're the people that made that happen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Oh my God. I'm so freaked out having Anne Doyle watching me. It's just... I've loved you for a long time. I just want you to know that. Just want you to know. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the 10 dark secrets, let's go to the 10 worst elements of commemoration. Can we just do the 10 worst? Come on. It was terrible, wasn't it? There was some really good bits. But I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about the terrible things, ladies and gentlemen. At 10, the Irish government buying Moore Street in late 2015, so there's no way anything could be ready by 2016. In fact, the museum probably won't be ready by 2023. At which time the entire commemoration will be over! At 9, ladies and gentlemen, rebellion, the worst pile of shite ever foisted on the Irish public. I'm sorry to say. You know I work for RT, but it's a free country. It's not really a free country. Don't believe what they tell you. America's much more free. You can say what you want. There's terrible libel laws here. Anyway, rebellion. Basically, rebellion was presented to us as a nice middle-class Dublin wedding ruined by angry women. That's all it was. During it, James Connolly is shot, and RT had the goal to advertise the Six Nations up in the corner while James Connolly was shot. Sing with me. 6 nations once again. 6 nations once again. Assholes. Okay. At number 8, painting the post boxes red in Dublin. Are you mad in the head? You're focusing on the fact that the only change that happened after 1922 is you're painting the post boxes green. At number 7, ladies and gentlemen, misspelling Irie and Mock on the wall of commemoration. You know that wall that includes the volunteers, the rebels, the British Army, children, cats, dogs, fish that got stuck in the rotors of the Helga gunboat, anything else that Joe Duffy wrote a book about. Like in America, you do not see a Vietnam wall with like all the Vietnamese, like with stretch to San Francisco. Anyway, also getting the name of one of the volunteers wrong, actually Cunningham Cullivan was civilian. At number 6, the Irish Times making people write new proclamations. New proclamations, ladies and gentlemen. This is a sacred document. This is the people of Ireland themselves are doing all this stuff, fictional, as done by fictional tool. Basically, there's nothing in this that's wrong. Okay, you can't parse the word equality. Equality means equality. At number 5, Geldof. And also Robert Fisk talking about ISIS with this knob. Get a train. At number 4, the 1916 committee putting people who had nothing to do in 1916 up on banners. Say what you like about these guys, they weren't there in 1916, they weren't alive. But less matter transportation was invented a la Star Trek. Thankfully, someone sprayed the amount of war dead onto Redmond. 35,000 Irish people who died in World War I. Well done. They hung it low enough. At number 3, the Irish Times printing the Sinn Féin Rebellion, reprinting it, but without Sinn Féin in the title. See? Sinn Féin in that one, in the original Irish Times, no Sinn Féin in that one. Why? Don't they like them? At number 2, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, this is a bit sensitive. Did anyone see the centenary thing on RT on the Monday night? The very moving centenary thing with, Colin T. Wilkinson singing One and a bunch of kids at the end singing Irish pop, which is probably the worst thing voiced on the universe since Irish pop. So all we had was a young girl walking up the hill, walking up to a phallic-shaped stone. Sorry, this happened. She puts her hand on the stone and it starts to shoot out this kind of patriotic... I'm sorry to say, it happened, okay? RT spent a lot of money on this. He spent a lot of money, big money on these graphics, okay? The patriotic stuff shoots into the air out of a pair of things. I mean, it's unbelievable. It keeps going. It starts shooting out of all of Ireland, like this patriotism shooting, everywhere. It's ridiculous. Shoots all over the world! All everywhere! Ah! Okay, and then suddenly we cut to like a bunch of people reading the proclamation to a camera, line by line, using their camera phones. Obviously, RT ran out of budget and said we just better get the Irish to just read lines of proclamation. And funny enough, like in Ireland it was sunny, but everywhere else they went, cold, freezing fucking cold. Look at these poor cold Irish people, who should be used to the cold. Look, freezing, absolutely freezing. Saying, our gallant allies, especially this guy in Washington, ridiculously cold. And of course, number 1, not having a government for the entire centenary. Not having a government in place for 90 days during the entire centenary. That's my top 10 terrible things in the centenary. Okay, I'm just putting a timer on this because, you people have short attention spans. Anyway, so here's the story. Secret number 1, forgotten massacre. Okay, everybody talks about 1916 like it happened in a vacuum. It didn't. There was a massacre in 1914. Remember the Ulster volunteers had formed up and they had armed themselves hugely. So the Irish volunteers were formed in 1912 as well. And in 1914, Erskine Childers goes on the whole gun and running exercise. And actually, Hello magazine were there. There's beautiful photos. There's Molly and Erskine on their way to get the guns in northern Germany. There's Erskine doing a bit of, posing and stuff. There's Molly and Erskine with the guns from Hamburg. They're sailing back now, looks good. And eventually they get to Ireland, they get to Dublin, and they walk from Holt all the way into town. And the British Army are only alerted to this late in the day. So they finally confront them at Bachelor's Walk, but except a whole bunch of Irish citizens had come together, Dublin citizens, and formed a huge phalanx of people just all over, a huge crowd, and the volunteers disappear with the guns into the streets and everyone elsewhere. The British soldiers are standing there in the heat, a few stones are thrown, and classically, in classic British fashion, they open fire and kill 4 people. It's called the Bachelor's Walk Massacre, and yet you will never hear it said in history, because no historian likes to tell you there's precedent to the 1916 rising, much as they riddle the Sharpsville Massacre creating Nelson Mandela's bombing campaign, or Bloody Sunday creating a large IRA. That's just how it was. This actually happened, and these are the relatives coming to see what happened. And of course, Jackie Gates is the famous painting about it. And of course, one of the battle cries of 1916 was, "Remember Bachelor's Walk," but nobody knows about it. 1916 happens, Project Casement, Liam Mellows in Galway, the Helga gunboat comes up the river. It doesn't do that much damage, it destroys Liberty Hall, but 2 guns of Trinity do. Amazingly, the Irish Independent blames the rebels for destruction in Dublin. That's like blaming, Hiroshima on the citizens of Hiroshima. Basically, blame the guns that blew up the city. And this is how much of Dublin was actually destroyed, a huge amount, city blocks. So 1916 is a failure, and having come back from working in JP Morgan for a year in 1915 is a young Michael Collins, aged 26 years of age. Secret 2, the conscription catalyst. Everyone thinks 1916 had some major depression. It didn't. It didn't. It was a small, isolated incident condemned by everybody from the bishops to the media. But what did cause issues was the amount of people dying in World War I. And eventually in 1918, the Brits decided to introduce conscription. Up to that point, nobody cared, because it was just working class guys, farm labourers, surplus industrial workers. But when it came to the Lord Mayor's son being picked to go and fight in France, or somebody else, or the bishop's brother, then there was a problem. So, this is the thing I based my photo on, of my thing. The worst drawn and anatomically done poster in the studio. That is not his arm. Like anyone went to art college and tell you his arm is way back. That arm could not possibly come from him. Unless he's having his arm twisted by the Brits, saying, "We'll give you home rule if you send everyone to die in World War I." So I basically posted that. So this was this is how appealing the whole thing was. Go to Bulgaria, see France, it's amazing. But the conscription crisis was an amazing thing. The bishops got behind anti-conscription, the government did, the media, even the Irish National Party, everybody. And over 2 million people signed an anti-conscription pledge. Can you imagine getting 2 million Irish people to agree on anything? Anything. Bar Garth Brooks concerts. We would eventually, in 20 concerts, we would have had 2 million people go to all of them, and he still would have sold out more. But amazingly, 2 million people did sign that, and that was the beginning of support for what went on in 1916. But it didn't happen before then. Here's the bishop supporting it, waving or saying, "See, Kyle, I have no idea what they're doing." And they even had a pledge against conscription. This is the only time in history that the Irish Church ever supported an anti-British motion. Up to that point, they had been totally in support of the Empire and the British Empire, and they soon resumed that position as the revolution happened. So these were the Irish casualties, ladies and gentlemen. 49,400 Irish people, 5,500 in our own conflict here. So you can just see how far constitutional home rule got you, and where Republican stuff got you. Secret 3, London friend to Michael Collins. Michael Collins is the most fascinating character in Irish history, and you'll never read a damn thing about it in any of his biographies, because you just think he was just a magic person. And in 1906, he moves to London at 16 years of age and starts working in the post office. Okay? Everyone says that the post office, but it's not like post office today. The post office at the time was the internet. The post office at the time was the intelligence service. The post office, you would have to have major clearance to work in the post office. Okay? And fascinatingly, in 1912, he meets a woman called Moyle Llewellyn Davies, who's an Irish woman, the daughter of an Irish parliamentary politician, and embarks on an affair with her. Okay? Many people say, no, they didn't have an affair. They did have an affair. I'll tell you what. She was married to Crompton Llewellyn Davies. Okay? Crompton Llewellyn Davies is the head legal person in the post office of the United Kingdom at the time. And his best friend is Lloyd George. So by 1912, 1913, Michael Collins is one shtup and 2 heartbeats away from Lloyd George. Okay? I say shtup because I'm also an American. My mom's from New Jersey. And you know what shtup means, right, guys? You know that. Anyway, what we're saying is a 22-year-old man who, for some reason, who had only joined the IRB 3 years earlier, is 2 heartbeats away from Lloyd George, who at that time is a minister for munitions and on his way to becoming Prime Minister. This is remarkable. We are talking about a super spy or someone who's incredibly lucky. So Collins in London. Later on in 1918, he goes to meet Woodrow Wilson, but is diverted away from there by the friends of Moyle Llewellyn Davies and Crompton Llewellyn Davies, who include James Barry, the writer of Peter Pan, also MI5, John Charters, also former MI5. In fact, the guy is surrounded by MI5 people, even in his 20s, even just 2 years after the uprising. But in 1918, he does meet Lawrence of Arabia, who was on the same project as Michael Collins, which is freeing the Arab states. And Michael Collins, who was possibly a British spy, who's involved in freeing the Irish state, but for Britain. But we see how this might have turned in a certain way. The idea that Michael Collins, by the way, was unrecognisable or just walked freely in the streets of Dublin without knowing him. This is the 1919 Bond film, Dahl Bond's film, done in Pathé News. Everybody by 1919 knew what he looked like. This is before he did Solo Head Bay. He was actually a young Minister for Finance. So who is this Collins? He's a remarkable person. Has worked at the highest level of the British civil service and also in JP Morgan for 1 year in 1950. Politicians like Peter Hart will turn around revisionists and go, Michael Collins had a stalker, her name was Moira Llewellyn Davies, and he met her in 1918. But everybody knows he met her in 1913. You can have an article like this by a so-called historian, and then you read an article by Moira Llewellyn Davies' granddaughter, Melissa Llewellyn Davies, who says Moira Llewellyn Davies was the love of Collins' life. Okay? Now, you might think that's unbelievable, but she wrote it herself. Her father, Richard, said it was the case. This is Richard Llewellyn Davies. In 1950, there's a biography of Richard Llewellyn, it's a story about a certain manager of Manchester United football team. Richard Llewellyn Davies was serving on the board of that football team at the time. He was a major architect in England at the time, and was referred to in the book as the rebel martyr's son. So there was an idea in people's heads that Michael Collins had a son. Now you might think that's a crazy theory, you might think anything about that, but it's only as crazy as him actually being in love with Kitty Kiernan, because nobody wants to spend that much time in Longford. Give me a break. Are they the same people? Are they similar? Are the eyes similar? Is there any facial similarity? We don't know. Moira Llewellyn Davies strangely wrote a memoir which her son burnt in 1940, and she died soon after, in 43, and yet there was no stone put in her grave until 2006. This is a woman married to a major civil servant in Britain, with huge connections, and for some reason she's been forgotten from history. Of course, poor Lawrence of Arabia died in a motorcycle crash, which I believe is probably staged, because he was a very dangerous figure. Imagine how dangerous he was to the nascent Arab world controlled by Britain and France. He had to die, and I think this correlates to a lot to Collins. He died in a motorcycle crash. In 1981, Richard Llewellyn Davies died in a car crash. So as we've seen, the British are good at two things: shooting unarmed civilians and creating more trouble than it's worth, and staging car crashes. So you can forward the mystery men in the treaty. You always have six men referred to in the treaty, but there was a seventh, a man called John Charters. I mentioned him before. He was a member of MI5. He was head of the Kynoch munitions factory in Arklow, which mysteriously blew up in 1915, a year before the Rising. The biggest munitions factory near Dublin, gone. But he befriended Collins, became a major friend. My belief is that John Charters was actually the guy who gave him the Cairo gang, who were all MI5 as well. And in fact, the way for him to ingratiate himself with Collins was actually to give away those names. Collins later went to Hans Place, that's where the treaty took place, 1921. The treaty took place in Hans Place in London. But he spent most of his time in Lady Lavery's house, another person who was stumping. This is Lady Lavery. If you don't believe he was stumping, this is her husband, John Lavery, at the time. Okay? Yeah, you're a great painter, but look, oh yeah. Hands up, ladies. Hands up for John. Hands up for Michael. Thanks, Andy. You're the only one who did it. Honestly. Come on, girls. Hands up for Michael. Hands up for John. Okay, because he might do a good painting. Anyway, this is John Lavery's painting of Michael Collins. The treaty was a disaster. The group were separated off into small groups. Griffith got drunk one night and literally handed the North over to Churchill. Promised it in a note, and the next day, in the cold light of day, Lloyd George produced the note saying, "You promised us partition."
during a separate meeting. To which I think inspired the Neil Jordan movie, you know, Arthur, you gave away the North. More on that Neil Jordan desecration later on, ladies and gentlemen. So Collins was in a tough position. He didn't want to sign the treaty. It's never said that, it's always thought retrospectively, no, he did, he was really into it. He wasn't. In fact, till the night before he wasn't going to sign the treaty. What happened? What did Lady Lowry do that night that convinced him to sign the treaty? Because she did. It's regarded as, it's well known that he spent the night there before the treaty was signed. Remember that Lady Lowry was also a hostess who worked for Lloyd George and put a lot of these parties together, got people together. The more you look at the story, the more intriguing it is. It's about 30 people partying and hanging out with each other for about 5 years before a treaty even comes together. It's a really interesting story, very like The Godfather Part 2. Except the wrong people get killed. So Collins is in a hard place. He doesn't want to sign the treaty, yet he does. Duggan doesn't even sign the treaty at all. He refuses to sign it until they call Devil Air, but they won't do it. And they have to cut his signature out of a document and actually stick it onto the treaty. So Duggan never signed it. The wily old Lloyd George wasn't that wily. He turned around and threatened the day before the treaty was signed, there will be immediate and terrible war if you do not sign this treaty. But no one ever mentions the fact that the dock workers in Liverpool and most of the docks were on strike at the time and would refuse to transport British Army across. Charters dies in 1924, married to a very interesting woman who goes out with an Italian poet and manages to stop guns getting into Ireland from Italy at the time. The treaty is signed, the press are completely in favour, as are the bishops, as are the usual shower, that are always in favour of keeping the status quo. The treaty is an appalling thing that actually created the situations we have for the rest of our history, but they're all into it. Lady Lowry is on the money, basically. No, I mean, she's literally on the money. I mean, that's how she was rewarded. Lady Lowry's portrait and the design of the new currency is given to John Lowry, with Lady Lowry sitting on the money for the rest of the time, well, until we change it. Secret number 5, jobs for the boys. A long Irish tradition that we're talking to. Does anyone know who W.E. Wiley is? W.E. Wiley was a prosecuting lawyer in the 1916 Rising. In fact, he's the guy that got Pearse and Connolly and everybody convicted. Not only that, 90 people were convicted in the Rising and all sentenced to death. This is the lawyer that got that happen, okay? The lawyer for the British. What do you think happened to W. Wiley after the Rising? Anybody? Hmm? Sorry? No car crash. No. The Brits only killed their enemies in car crashes. Sorry? Well done. You got a big job in Ireland. Do you know where you became? Part of the Supreme Court of the Free State. Now in Russia, even the Romanovs end up at the bottom of a mine shaft. And they're the royal family. This is the guy who prosecutes and has Pearse sentenced to death, and he ends up at the Supreme Court of the Free State. And this is the one fact that you can take away with you to tell you we didn't have a civil war, we had a counter-revolution. Okay? It's a counter-revolution. As in the forces that try to create the Republic are defeated, and the old forces take over again. The Free State came into being at the time, and of course they were wearing top hats. Tim Healy, the guy who destroyed Parnell, becomes a Governor General, sitting up at the park. Famously, Collins goes up to Dublin Castle, all the civil servants come out and they're shivering in their boots as they're going to shoot us all. And when asked what to do with them, Collins says, actually leave them there, they're doing a grand job. Of course, him being a civil servant himself, he thought they were doing a grand job. And what happens is, basically, the country is taken over at the time by an arch-conservative, arch-Catholic cabal of people. I don't care what your politics are, that's exactly what happened. And this painting is an analogy for it. Unfortunately, it's called analogy. You shouldn't really call paintings analogy. Paintings should be analogies. You shouldn't actually title them analogy. Keating was not very subtle, but he was a great painter. And he shows the Ireland that we got. The priest talking to the Gombe man, the woman left all by herself carrying the baby, and the Republican and the Free State are killing each other. And the drunken artist at the bottom, representing Keating himself. and the big house half burnt in the distance. And what we got effectively was a new version of British rule, government by the rich for the rich. This is a Fianna Fáil poster, don't worry, they're not like that anymore. In this poster, Ernest Blythe, the first finance minister, turns round to the poor woman and says, "I have nothing for you, my good woman, the country can't afford it." But says to the rich people, "This is to help you rear your family, my poor man." These are the apples. This family here called the apples. Anyway, so that's the story there. We don't have to go through that. Fine. So basically, to actually celebrate. Sorry, that's what I think of Winston Churchill. I think of jabbing the church up, basically. So to celebrate what W.E. Wiley is, ladies and gentlemen, he's a safe pair of hands. Okay? Do you know when you listen to Barney Finucane on a Sunday, they all joyfully say, "Oh, it's a safe pair of hands." It's like when John McCain turned around and said, "The fundamentals of the economy are strong." When you hear someone saying the fundamentals of the economy are strong, get a fucking plane, because it's all over. Okay? And when you hear someone saying he's a safe pair of hands, think of John Tierney of Irish Water. Think of all those people who are promoted sideways because they'll destroy the world. Honestly, that's the reason why. So, I hope John's not here. So, of course he isn't. He has no cultural interest whatsoever. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to sing a song called Safe Pair of Hands, and I want to hopefully after this song that you don't ever think of the phrase safe pair of hands the same way again, but you think of it as being the most dangerous thing you can imagine in the entire world. Thank you. It's done in the style of a kind of early 20th century Victorian ballad, and you'll see why. See, everybody feels safe. Everybody feels in control. What is it about leaders in this country? Why do they wind up useless or just dead? We've had 5,000 years of those obsessed with their careers instead of how the Irish should be led. Queen Maeve and all the kings were greedy bastards, while Cullivan and the boys, they fought and bled. The only one with fight who wanted Ireland to unite ended up with an axe stuck in his head. That's Brian Boru to you. And traitors, they abounded in our story. With the Brits, they fought and scraped and played. McMurrough gave them the keys like they were US companies. But at least they stayed a while, unlike today, and built some infrastructure. What is it that defines these awful people that somehow gained the right to lead this land? The good ones die too young, while the bad ones die in bed. And when they die in bed, what is the thing that's often said? He was a safe pair of hands. He's a safe pair of hands. Safe pair of hands. He really has no talent, all his life he's been quite bland. He's a safe pair of hands. He's a safe pair of hands. Sing with me. Safe pair of hands. He'll never be fired or receive reprimand. Daddy did the same job and he's doing it just grand. And when he needs to travel, it's expenses on the man, for he's a safe. You sound so beautiful, Lou Ross. I almost hate to be doing such a cynical and horrific show to ruin your dreams. In Ireland now the story is no different. The absolutely worst to rise to the top. And because they're surrounded by the worst themselves, there's no one there to even shout, stop. It's all delay, they never make decisions, except the one that got them where they are. While King Cullivan on top, and all below me must be stopped. It's a universe of shit, but I'm a star. I'm growing on the dome. So when you wonder why you feel alone now, everything you're told is good as not. Nothing ever happens, though they promised you for sure.
opposition is pretender. From Joan to Mick to Enda, they're all same pairs of hands. They're same pairs of hands. Come on. Same pairs of hands. They aren't so much leaders as ambitious bottom feeders. They are safe pairs of hands. They're safe pairs of hands. Safe pairs of hands. You can trust they'll steer the ship of state into the fucking sand. Yes, they're safe pairs of hands. They're safe pairs of hands. Safe pairs of hands. He'd sell a natural resource for a measly 50 grand. He's never suffered hardship or the cold assassin's hand. I know lots of guys like that in big successful bands. We always pick the mediocre. They wouldn't even win at poker with a pair of hands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And for Christ's sake, when you listen to Barry on Sunday, and someone says, say pair of hands, run like that. Thank you. I made a note of who left during that song. Just, you know, they're safe pairs of hands. Sorry, just so silly. Secret Six, ladies and gentlemen, silencing the women. So one thing, these are the women of Ireland. There was 20,000 members of Coming at the time of at the height of the War of Independence. 20,000, and 15,000 members of the IRA. So there was 35,000 men and women fighting the entire war. That's 1% of the population. And a lot of other people says, you do it. So the women were in a strong position. In fact, in 1918, we had an amazing election where we had the first woman ever elected in the British Empire, which at the time owned 75% of the globe. So Constance Markovich, the first ever woman elected in the British Empire. Give her a round of applause. Some of you don't like her. But you know who else didn't like her? W.E. Wiley, and in his memoir, he's the one who created the lie that she cried and whimpered and said, no, you can't kill a woman, you can't kill a woman, during her trial in 1916. Well, I wouldn't believe anything that came out of W.E. Wiley's mouth. So there you go. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Coming to Mon were an amazing organisation. They were the kind of the female wing of the, and they had a much better logo than the Volunteers. Like, it said what it did in the tin, basically. Women with guns. That's basically what it was. No bullshit. You know what I mean? Amazing organisation, and by the time of, you know, they were very anti-treaty. Irish women in general were anti-treaty, far more than the men. Because, not to be sexist here, but women like getting jobs done. Do you know what I mean? Like they do. Like, you know, when you come home and the man has half done the dishes or half done the ironing, it's bollocks. You know what I mean? You don't want that. I'm joking, of course. I'm a fully reconstructed person. Anyway, the votes of the treaty were amazing. 64 for, 57 against. The 6 female TDs, by the way, we had 6 female TDs voted in 1919, I believe. And after that, it whittled down till there was very few, and we didn't have 6 female TDs again until 1977. But there was a huge female vote at the time. The IRB was 11 for, 4 against. IRB is a strange organisation. But look at Coming to Mon, 63 for the treaty, 419 against. Women were definitely against the treaty. Interestingly, as the treaty was signed, immediate work was done on the new constitution of the Free State, actually a good constitution, quite an interesting constitution. And what happened on the 16th of June 1922 was that there was an election. And the constitution was only printed the day before the election. Now, under British law, women under 30 couldn't vote, and men under 25 couldn't vote. But in the new Free State Constitution, all men and women over 21 could vote, which was about 400,000 people. Okay? Now remember that the average age of becoming a Mon or IRA member was 22.
So all of those people were under that age. Hannah Sheehy Skeffington went to Griffith immediately and said, we must use the new franchise of the Irish Free State Constitution for this election in 1922, not the old one, because you'll disenfranchise over 180,000 women. Sorry, 280,000 women. She went along to Griffith, he told her to get lost. So 400,000 people didn't vote, they were meant to vote, and all of them would have been involved in the revolution. The people who fought the revolution didn't get a chance to vote on it. This is from Neil Jordan's film, 7th of June 1922, the treaties carried a popular vote. Neil Jordan's film, Michael Collins, is the biggest heap of shit ever actually foisted on the Irish public. To quote Mary McCarthy, there's not a single word of truth in it. Every word in it is a lie, including and but. He couldn't even get the date of the treaty right. It's not the 7th of June, it's the 16th of June, and the reason you remember that very important treaty election, is because it was the same day as Bloomsday. And Ulysses had been published a few months earlier. Okay, so the election is remarkable. We never, Cumann Gael, or the pro-treaty people, never had a majority in the state, much like our government now. But it was close enough, but it seems not close. It's the first time Labour won in an election. They didn't run in the other elections. And they get 17, Sinn Féin Bróir 58, and the Collins Dev Pact, etc., but they didn't really go through with that. Tom Johnson of Labour is a curious figure. Had he not gone for election, or had he not decided to be in Parliament with the pro-treaty Sinn Féin, then there wouldn't have been this kind of faux Parliament that actually ran the Civil War. So he has a lot to answer for, but he's also a great guy because he wrote the Democratic Programme with the first Dáil. A far more important document even than that, and I hate to say that. The 1923 election is more remarkable. When you add the 400,000 people and the new franchise is introduced, it's much, much closer. And there's still a minority government where they need 14 to hold power. So the women are, after that, after the Free State takeover, women are pretty much airbrushed out of society. And the hope that the Republic is going to bring is lost as well. Cumann Gael, of course, in 1926 designed the Easter Lily, just in case you're worried about the provenance of the Easter Lily. It was designed by Cumann and Maughan. Secret number 7, brother against brother. There's always a tale that we're told that the Civil War was brother against brother, like the American Civil War, which also was brother against brother because they all lived in different states. Michael Collins is in a curious position now. He's now top dog in the state. In fact, he's got 3 of the top jobs in the state. He's the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, he's the Minister of Finance, and President of the Provisional Government. Remember, there was no Free State for an entire year between 1921 and 22. There's a thing called the Provisional Government. The IRA, meanwhile, at 15,000 strong, are mainly down in Limerick, just waiting for orders and waiting to see what's going to happen. Meanwhile, a small, nascent Free State army is put together. British uniforms are dyed green. A small army of 7,000 is put together, basically in Beggars Bush. This army can have cars, start doing stuff like that, and a nascent thing is happening. A lie begins then that Free State propaganda started saying that the IRA was basically new guys coming in, flooding in, and it wasn't the old IRA that had fought the War of Independence. But this is actually not true, because if you actually look at the figures, 1,250 people fighting the Rising, 17,000 British soldiers. 15,000 fighting independence, against 42,000 British soldiers. 15,000 fighting against 58,000 Free State soldiers at the height of the Civil War. The figure of 15,000 being the same is quite interesting, because in the main, they were the same. There's very few IRA men, bar friends of Collins, who actually went over to the Free State. In the main, they remained anti-treaty. They start calling the Republicans irregulars, and a national soldier is now a Free State soldier. But there's a reason why the Free State was so successful in recruiting people, and it was money. In February, Bank of Ireland finally gives the government a loan, £1 million, and they start paying Free State commanders 100,000 quid in today's money a year. Today, an army commandant will only get 65,000, so they're paying a third more. My granddad was making 15,600 a year. So you can see what effectively is happening here. So a huge army is built up, but it's not brother against brother. The army is actually made up of 30,000 ex-World War I soldiers who never fought in the War of Independence or 1916. A bunch of people from the north, and then newly recruited people from the south and some major members of Collins' crew. Secret 8, the saint removal of the Commander-in-Chief. Again, Michael Collins, every word is a lie, including ending. But supposedly Collins is at the forecourts. He wasn't. He was nowhere near it. In fact, he was against the forecourts bombing. The myth in this film was built up, you know, where Jonathan Rhys-Meyers wants to kiss De Valera the day before De Valera kills Collins somehow. Of course, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers shoots Collins when they conveniently park their cars, just one after the other, conveniently on a bend, just exactly where you would want them to be parked if you were going to shoot the Commander-in-Chief of the Army. The famous story is that Collins ran out on the road, he's shot, he ran out on the road, a man who had evaded capture, a man who had evaded a bullet all his life, runs out on the road, decides to have a pitch battle with a bunch of guys up the hill. It beggars belief. Famously, the last scene of Michael Collins is he died paradoxically in an attempt to finally remove the gun from Irish politics. This couldn't be further from the truth. Okay? The funny thing about Michael Collins is that his prime motivation when he said freedom to achieve freedom was that he was setting up an army in the south to invade the north. It was called the Army of the North. And Collins at all times, especially during the pogroms of 1922, early 1922, before the Falkland were bombed, his primary focus was fighting the Brits out of the north and supporting Catholics with guns against the pogroms, much like Charlie Mulvey in 1970. The pogroms in the north were huge, they were absolutely massive. So the idea that Collins is somehow this kind of, you know, he's left the north behind. Every cabinet meeting that they can remember from that time, Collins brings up the north, but nobody else in the cabinet wants to talk about it, much like today. So Collins is in a weird place. There's an old order he's had to assassinate Henry Wilson, who is now becoming de facto military leader of Northern Ireland. And Henry Wilson is shot on the steps of his home in June 1922. Collins spends his whole time trying to get the two shooters out of prison by springing them from prison, but he can't do it. You'll never read about this because you'll be told that Collins was focused primarily on defeating the irregulars and all of this, but the war hadn't even started at that point. We're now seeing a divide between Collins and his cabinet. And the cabinet is made up of W.T. Cosgrave, people like Kevin O'Higgins, people like that. A remarkable thing happens. The IRA go and seize the forecourts. But see, it's not seized. What they're doing is they're moving their offices from Parnell Square down to the forecourts because they need more space. That's actually what they're doing. Because the IRA is still a de facto standing army. They're not an illegal army by any means. They're still under the orders of the IRB. Famously, Ginger O'Connell was kidnapped, and that's what makes them launch the attack on the forecourts. But of course, Ginger O'Connell was a reprisal for the kidnapping of another guy up in Baggot Street when they're trying to seize vans or trucks to bring weapons up to the north. Remember, the Army of the North is a de facto agreed thing between Collins and the IRA at the time. The forecourts is where the guns are leaving from. Easter week repeats itself. The IRA still defends the Republic. The state, Ursula Childers is writing stuff like this. India Mellows and the Irish Revolution, which is the most important book ever written about the period. There's a weird moment in it which changes everybody's idea about what was going on. The British military authorities ultimately agreed to lend 2 pieces of artillery to attack the forecourts. Armed with this information, Griffith, Mulcahy and O'Duffy battering down Collins' objections. So Neil Jordan has him down there running the thing, but in truth, he's objecting to it. They knew the cause and recognised the occasion. That evening, a Free State officer performed a macabre little ceremony at Beggarbush. He constructed a wreath of flowers with which, in mock solemnity, he paraded the barrack square. Asked to explain this act of invultuation, great word, he replied that he was performing the funeral rites of the Republic. The decision had been taken. What was left of the Republic was to be destroyed by force. Counter-revolution was now to order an Easter week in reverse. That's a very strange thing, but of course the Free State Army is made with people who had never fought for the Republic in the first place. The attack happens under the command of Emmett Dalton, who's inexplicably young, and a bunch of weird stuff happens to Collins. You'll read on his Wikipedia page that he was Minister for Finance till August 22nd when he died in 1922. And he was also Commander-in-Chief and he was also Minister for Finance. But actually on June 12th, W.T. Cosgrave takes over as Minister for Finance. But no minutes are published, nothing's put in the paper. On June 17th, W.T. Cosgrave takes over as President of the Provisional Government. So Collins loses 2 jobs within a week. there's obviously huge fights going on within the cabinet that we'll never know about, which I'll explain later. Richard Mulcahy is now kind of running the Free State Army. The battle in O'Connell Street takes place, Colin Bruin is killed. Collins is now in a strange situation. There's unseen forces around him that are now changing the modus operandi of a guy who was previously the most powerful person in about 2 weeks. This is a picture of John F. Kennedy, but I find the similarity between the two characters to be so interesting. Collins is now surrounded by enemies, basically, within and without. Griffith dies, supposedly of exhaustion, but I know it's cyanide. But look, I won't bother trying to prove that here. So Collins is going on an inspection tour of Cork, okay? As Commander-in-Chief of the Army, the only job he has left. But it's not an inspection tour because he goes down, meets Joe Sweeney, and says, yes, I ordered the assassination of Henry Wilson, and B, I'm going out to meet Dev to end the Civil War right now. We're going to get together and we're going to fight the North. Collins gets down to Cork, we all know what happens, the famous assassination. There is one case of brother against brother, which is that Tom Hales was head of the flying column that killed Collins, and Sean Hales is the Free State commander in charge of the West Cork area. This is interesting later on. We know the story. Collins gets killed, and he's shot, proven mainly by Sonny O'Neill. And people say it's Sonny O'Neill, people think it's Emmett Dalton. There's weird things around that. I can never possibly prove who did it, but all I do know is that Sonny O'Neill was a British Army marksman in World War I, and was also an RIC officer before World War I, and was one of only 159 former British soldiers to join the IRA during the entire period. Funny story I found out about the Leyland 8, which was the funny yellow touring car Collins was down in. They couldn't get it up a ditch, so they had to leave it and take Collins' dead body and put it into a costly tender and bring it to the British Military Army Hospital 50 kilometres further away than the Irish hospital that he could have been brought to. The Leyland 8 is taken away and is last seen on the docks in Liverpool in September of 1922, and is later said to end up in Kenya. And actually guys went over to try and find him and it was never seen again. Now if you believe Collins' murder was an assassination, or that it was a crime scene, why would you get rid of something like that? And then of course I thought about JFK's car, having been reupholstered and fully fixed up and becoming a presidential car again on the orders of Lyndon B. Johnson weeks after the assassination. Okay? You may not like the conspiracy theories about JFK, but that is a curious thing to do with a piece of what I call evidence. This is the Collins Memorial, which I think has been, I would call it, it's been Fine Gaelized. You know, with black railings with gold tops on them, you know, the kind of things they like out in Terranure and stuff like that around the houses. Sorry to say anyone who's Fine Gael here, but that's just your taste. Sorry, that's just the way it is. You're not a tasty bunch. Okay? Bit of all will probably knock it down, let's be honest. And build something new with pyrite in it. Labour wouldn't build anything. Sinn Féin have never built anything. So Collins, an autopsy is done by Oliver St. John Gogarty, but we'll never know the results of the autopsy because it's gone. Oliver St. John Gogarty quickly immigrates to America. Another John Lavery photo. John Lavery got a lot of work out of this whole period, let's be honest. Massive funeral, all of these things happen. Emmett Dalton, curious figure. He's always accused of having shot Collins at the time. I'm not so sure. But one weird thing that happens is he becomes head of Rank Cinema Ardmore Studios in the 50s and makes a movie called This Other Eden, which is a comedy about a guy who goes down with a former leader and is accused of shooting him at an ambush down in Cork. I mean, it's the weirdest thing in the world to actually make a movie about it, to try and tell people it wasn't me that did it. With Collins' death, everything becomes up for grabs. Dev is now the hate figure. This is him. They even have the graves of like Wilson, Griffith, and Collins to do with Dev for some reason, even though it's obvious Dev didn't kill a couple of them. So I often wonder about Collins' death. Who benefits? And I think of the film movie JFK, and I always just wonder about those things. You know, who benefits? And I think there's one bunch of people who benefit. First of all, it's the conservative class of Ireland who never really wanted the Republic in the first place. They really didn't. One historian in Britain said that Collins' death was the best thing that could happen for the treaty. Until then, it was a wavering thing that may never really come true. But with Collins' death, the treaty was solidified and sealed forever, as was partition. Winston Churchill, Henry Wilson was a great friend of his, and he actually was so angry he made the Free State attack the four ports, and he threatened to send the British Army in. I believe he has a lot to do with Collins' death. But I believe some of the guys who benefited were these guys. These were the nascent government of the Free State. And, you know, they're well respected now, but I often wonder, were they secretly pleased that Collins was gone? Remember Collins, there was 2 attempts in his life the weekend before he went to Cork. There was a lady in a house in Bury Park, and there was people who shot out the windows of the house. Secret number 9, erasing the past, the executions of the Burn Order. See, I told you it's like the Late Late. It starts out fun and then it gets fucking miserable. I told you it's like that. I should call the Late Late the Long Long Show. So, with Collins' death, they can finally pick up and get rid of anybody they want, really, because the anger is so palpable. And the first one they get rid of is Ursula Childers for having a gun that Collins had given as a gift. But so the law is if you are in possession of a weapon, you get executed. The hard men come to the fore. Kevin O'Higgins, whose uncle Tim Healy was the Governor General at that stage. They shoot Ursula Childers. And then on the 6th of December, the Constitution of the Free State is finally published. And a great document, really. At the time, way ahead of many others around the world. And so they had done that. But there's one niggling thing going on. Sean Hales, who as you remember is commander of the West Cork, he's livid about Collins. He's walked Belmont Law countless times. He's tried to hold an inquiry, but of course, the day after Collins' assassination, Emmett Dalton orders no inquiries allowed, no inquiries into this death allowed. So he's ripping, and he comes up to Beggar's Bush Barracks, and goes to billet in his usual spot, and they tell him, no, you can't stay here, and he has to go and stay in the Ormond Hotel. The next day, him and Pádraig O'Malley, who are both members of the Dáil, are shot on their way out of the Ormond Hotel, and Sean Hales is killed. So the last man who's really looking for the answer to Collins has been taken out. Now, that leads then to Richard Mulcahy taking over, and he becomes a hard man and Commander-in-Chief of the Free State. And they begin to order executions en masse, 4 executions of leaders. And every time you want to talk about Owen McNeill and how great he was, and he countermanded the order, and he fucked up on the Boundary Commission, he did a third thing. He also seconded the order for Rory O'Connor's execution. So he was the person who was behind that. Kevin O'Higgins, well, it was very tough for Kevin O'Higgins to execute Rory O'Connor. After all, he had been Rory O'Connor been best man at his wedding. Yet he struggled all night, supposedly, with it, and then came in and said, yes, execute. I think if I'd struggled all night about killing my best man, I would have just sat out the vote, let's say. So the 4 guys are executed, and extrajudicial executions start in full. And yet, the Sean Hales thing now is used as the catalyst that led to the executions, led to the bitterness of the Civil War, and yet a letter from Sean Hales' entire family into the paper says, we look at discuss the execution of 4 Irishmen as a reprisal for the death of our dearly beloved brother Sean Hales, and we think a criminal folly to believe that such methods will end strife in our land. We were of the opinion that reprisals on either side will only increase bitterness and delay reconciliation that all patriotic Irishmen long pay for, and that the sole testimony of a British officer is very insufficient proof of how he met his death. Because when Sean Hales and Pádraig O'Malley were shot at Ormond Quay, no one was ever caught. But the only guy who was a witness to it was a British soldier. I mean, for our state and for our civil war to happen on such spurious accounts is a remarkable thing. And yet another dark secret. There's about 400 dark secrets here. I just call it 10 to make it easy for you. The killing of Liam Mellows was a remarkable thing. It was a terrible thing, really, in that he was probably the most forward-thinking, along with Tom Johnson of the Labour Party, with whom he worked on the democratic programme of the first Dáil. And kind of a very interesting figure, like, you know, the IRA owned ships and everything. They had raised £6 million in America. And that's what made them actually a force to contend with the British. Democratic programme was an amazing thing. Can't go through it now because you're all down for a pint.
One of the interesting things about him was that he was actually a socialist, and believe it or not, the only country to ever recognise the Republic of 1918 was Bolshevik Russia. Nobody else did. So the executions were pretty savage. 16 in the 1916 Rising, 24 by the British in the War of Independence, and 77 in the Civil War. So we doubled the British tally. Actually, no, we tripled it. But anyway, whatever we did, we were much better at killing ourselves than the Brits were. The casualties were big, 485 then, 2014 in the independence, and about 3,000 plus. We'll never know the full amount of casualties of the Civil War. But the Free State took over, they won the Civil War, and we got a kind of a Little Britain Ireland, basically. We even had George on our stamps. I didn't realise we actually had the king on our stamps when I saw that. But we did build a hydroelectric dam, so that was good, wasn't it? So Charlie Chaplin effectively took over for 10 years as our Taoiseach, W.T. Cosgrave. Interesting figure in that W.T. Was a very Catholic person, and so was Dev. And it's funny that the two leaders that were left alive were very, very kind of Catholic conservative people. I have a feeling that those profiles go in. Kevin O'Higgins was actually shot in 1927, even long after the Civil War was over. And there was a memorial put up to him in Booterstown, which was launched in 2012 by Taoiseach Independent, which is amazing. So he had no issue with the guy who shot his best man. But anyway, every few months somebody smashes it up. That's basically what happens, just to let you know. So when someone says to you, Civil War politics is over now, don't be fooled. Like, you're going to be so angry after this show. You're going to be so angry. It's like Civil War politics will be right back at the top of your list. And we got the Conservative Ireland that we wanted. 1927 election was hilarious because there was such discord. And amazingly, it mimics today. Cumann na Gael were down to like 47, they needed 30 to hold power, just like now. Fianna Fáil were at 44, not like 43 like now. It was a very disjointed type of thing. They had to call another election in 3 months, which I wish would happen. And they still needed 15 to hold power. So those 4 elections that Cumann na Gael were in power, they never had a majority. It's remarkable. Of course, independence always wrecking everything all the time. Like always independence, it's always, So Erskine Childers helped me greatly on this. This is the great-grandson of Erskine Childers. He helped me with a bunch of details. And, just talking about when Dad came to power, I mean, it was quite amazing he came to power. And here he is with an old Free State judge who still has the thing, because we had our own courts, we had the Sinn Féin courts, but we got rid of them and just kept the lads with the wigs, And, but he told me a remarkable thing about when Dad came to power in 1932 on May the 9th. Richard Mulcahy did something remarkable on May the 8th, or May the 7th. It's called the Burn Order. Nobody knows about it. And effectively what was happening in 2 days' time, Fianna Fáil were meant to take over and get the state records and get everything, and get all of the records, all the minutes of all the stuff that happened during the Civil War. And Richard Mulcahy ordered the civil servants to take them out into the Dáil Garden, and they burnt every single document, including a massive file on the death of Michael Collins. So we're never going to know what happened in those minutes of meetings. We're never going to know what happened with that stuff. Sorry, just timer. Ruined the whole effect of what I was doing. Ruined by Apple. So imagine that, burning every single record of what went on during the Free State.
It's that the differences carefully fostered by the foreign government, which has divided the minority from the majority in the past. Permanent national government, hereby constituted, will administer civil and military affairs. We place the cause of the Irish under the most high court, whose blessing we evoke upon our cowardice and inhumanity. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its discipline and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves, prove itself worthy of the august. Signed, nobody. They're all dead.
So, I have no time to do the last secret, so is that okay?
Do it.
I have no time, is that right? I have no time.
Do it.
You sure? I'll do it quick. Okay. We'll get to the pub, I promise. We'll get to the pub, I promise. Okay, we're not doing too bad. Okay. Supposedly the pub's open late here though, don't they?
Jesus, sorry. Okay, very quickly. I had an argument with Ruth Dudley Edwards on the radio, okay? You know Ruth Dudley Edwards? And she's like, revisionism is only retaking hold now. Which is bullshit. Revisionism was here almost since the creation of the state. In fact, the Free State is a revisionism of the Republic. That's what it is, okay? And even they talked about like insurrection and said, I mean, oh, so this. But actually, insurrection was quite a revisionist way of looking at the Rising in itself. Beautiful show. But the amazing thing about how we treated the Rising, how we treated our revolution, it's everywhere around us. It's in our built fabric. Okay, so this idea that we didn't revise, that we somehow celebrate a revolution, we don't. Because in America, different things would happen. Buildings like Valley Forge is like celebrated. I've been to it. You know, you go to places where revolutions happen and there are actual buildings. This is Liberty Hall. It was rebuilt after 1916. It was rebuilt, every bit of it. What did we do in 63? We knocked it down. It's a holy site. It's a holy relic as far as I'm concerned, but we knocked it down. This is Mount Street Bridge, the famous Mount Street Bridge where the Battle of Mount Street Bridge took place. What do we have now? Clonwilliam House. We took no care of the sites of the Rising. In fact, you'll notice that only working class areas are named after Republican heroes. If you go to Dublin, it's like, you can still get into Brighton Square and everything like that. You know, all of those things are still there. They've only changed Kingstown to Dunleary, but apart from that, all the names are right in London. There was because we wanted to take the GPO and turn it into the Pro Cathedral. Can you believe that? That was a plan to turn it into the Pro Cathedral. Even though Nelson's Hill, which is ridiculous. Because we should have just taken Nelson off and put Pierce on top. That would have been simple. But so Egypt blew it up. Right? Well, we still have Nelson's head. Nelson's head is still in the centre of Dublin. It's still on display in the centre of Dublin. But you know whose head isn't on display in the centre of Dublin? Patrick Pearse. Never once put a statue of Patrick Pearse in Dublin. There were designs in the 60s. Here's a design. It's a really rotten design by St. Egypt. There is one. There's a bust, but it's out of that farm in St. Denis. That's the countryside. Everyone knows beyond the canals of Dublin is the countryside. So you want a Tralee? Tralee's miles away. How did the Rising happen? It happened in Dublin. You would have a bust in Dublin. There's only one statue of actually the Rising to put it to bed by the Labour Party. It's the first one ever since 1916. The Rising, you know, to genuflections in the 60s, it's a complete misnomer. It's a lie. Amazing, I mean, when this area in 2008, you go to Crystal Flats area around Newton Park, former curling grounds in Wednesday, but it's not just the Irish. You have a flagpole, they have some pictures of Irish people with books, you know, walking around because we're famous for saving, you know, civilization by, you know, bringing books back to Europe after the fall of Rome, you know, we're mostly other science scholars with books. secular education for boys and girls to Protestants and Catholics, and eventually to open the road into life. Her function, like the economy of Ireland, is to get something. And finally, to go to great, and those who think the revolution was possible, they finally realized